Hello, I am reading a book called, see if you can see it or not, it's called The Generation of Post-Memory, Writing and Visual Culture After the Holocaust, and it is by Marianne Hirsch. I chose this book because I thought it would be a good resource for my dissertation focus, which is on arts and trauma healing. I also am not going to free speak because it's hard for me to do, so I wrote down some notes to talk about this book. First of all, I wanted you guys to notice it's full of post-it notes, and I've got a ton of pages flipped over and lots of markings because this book is an awesome resource. Um, it's a challenging book to read, not so much because the language is difficult, but because the author packs in resources all over the place. Like one sentence, she'll have like 10 resources of books or movies or things like that that relate to this topic. So I'm having kind of an odd reaction to it, like a little bit frustrating reaction because I've grown really used to digital resources that have links that I can mark as favorites, or I can copy and paste them and put them in folders, or I can put them on Zotero. But this is a book, and so it's really challenging because there's so much to it that I want to remember and go back to, and I know I'm going to forget a lot. So let's see. One thing I wanted to talk about was very early in the book, like between pages 3 and 7, she just goes right to the heart. She was like in the 70s. This lady is a feminist and a professor and a history professor, and she was introduced to this film. It's Claude Lanzmann's monumental film called Shoah. It's 9.5 hours long. It took 2 days for her to watch it. It was shown in some area where she was teaching, and it was like a 2 day production of it. And Shoah is a Hebrew term. It means catastrophe, and it's become the term used to refer to the Holocaust. So like me, the author is second generation to World War II survivors, although my parents were not Jewish. My dad was a Marine and he fought during World War II. He was struck multiple times by shrapnel. And as I got older, I realized how lucky I was to be alive because his life was spared. So he was only 18 when he enlisted and went right to the war. And so I grew up with that threat of war still lingering and the division it created or fostered, depending how you look at it, and the recovery that it took for survivors who worked to move forward as they breathed new life into work, families, and such, but who also held in that stale breath of the trauma that forever shattered their worlds. And that is what it is like to be a second generation or third or even fourth generation survivor. You live through the memories of your parents, your ancestors. So that's what this book is really about. And Marian Hirsch discusses post memory, looking at whether or not we can remember other people's memories and what that means. And her focus is very much on visual images that have been left behind as they're used over and over again in imagery, such as certain infamous images that we see in Holocaust Museum images, as well as images such as the cover of her book, in which several images, like photographs and drawings and such, they're interplayed with one another to tell the story of the trauma and to work to define the impact it has on future generations, as well as the lines that are blurred between one's reality and the reality of another's, like your elders. Um, your stories as a second generation survivor become the stories that, like your stories become what your parents' stories were. So it's kind of an very interesting. There's a lot of research going on right now in this area. It's a very real phenomenon. And so what else can I say? I mentioned that she's a feminist, and the author is a feminist, and she noted right away when she watched Shoah that the women were not really represented, the men were represented, and she thought that was peculiar, and she's worked to kind of change that. Um, like I said, began her work in the 70s, so feminism was fairly new at that point, and she's done a lot of work to um, push women forward, giving them more of an active role in Holocaust memories. Let's see. She notes lots of interesting things as she dissects photographs and other artwork regarding the Holocaust. It's a huge part of what this book is about. One thing that I found fascinating is her delineation of the masculine versus the feminine in the Holocaust images. She states that viewers have come to see images of the Nazis and their supporters as masculine and images of victims as feminine, and this can lead to wrong ideas about victims as being powerless, cooperative, even caring about the enemy. It also leads to wrong ideas about the masculine in cultures that allowed power and strength over those deemed weak. It's the classic fairy tale mantra at play here, where there's a villain and a hero. Life isn't that simple, but to cope with trauma at stake, i.e., looking at the images that are so horrific, whether you were there or not, um, it's a coping mechanism that we use. So the author notes the context of the photos we see of the Holocaust, that the contextualization of them is really important. We see them pulled out of context, so a lot of them we don't know if they happened. Sometimes before it's easier to tell if like they're pictures of Jewish people in the ghetto, but it's hard to tell sometimes if it was during or after liberation. So there are images of Jewish people holding each other up as they walk through the gate of Auschwitz, for example. And then she talks about the purpose of the person taking the photograph. What is the purpose? Is it to remember? Is it to further victimize? Is it to applaud, especially liberation? Is it because it was someone's job and they were historically needing to, and assigned to take those photos? So there's a lot to think about there too. And she warns about having what she calls a Nazi gaze, and to ask ourselves if we are perpetrator, victim, bystander, or liberator when we take photographs of things, especially people in trauma. Like I said, this book is intense. It's a really tough read, and the material is horrifying. It's very well researched. She is a poignant author. She's passionate about this topic and how art relates to how art relates to trauma and how it can either help or heal. And that is from the stance of being the artist as well as viewing the art. So there's a lot packed into each page. It overwhelms me as a reader, and I have had to slow down. I thought I would get through this quickly, but I can't skim it because there's so much to take. And so I've been, like I showed you, highlighting and putting post-it notes all over the place. I got a little distracted. I guess not in a bad way, but I ended up renting the show from Amazon Prime last week. I didn't watch all of it, but it's pretty good, and I think that I need to and want to as a student and an artist, as the daughter of now deceased Marine whose trauma from the war. Finally, my dad's personal pain and nightmares were taken to the grave because he suffered a lot from his trauma. But it's important for me to have that live on, and so I don't really know why exactly. That's part of the personal journey, maybe with what my dissertation will be about. It's affected a lot of people, so the generation of post memory is all about that, and the author has helped me understand why I personally never want to forget, even though the tragedy of it all wasn't something I directly witnessed. And the pain of remembering is heartbreaking, and as much as we can say the Holocaust is, our focus on it is very much about remembering as well as not letting it happen again. I think there's more to it than that. So this author is a great book. So I'm not sure exactly where my review of this will take me, but probably pieces of what I talked about will be in it. Thank you.